Confidence isn't a gift. It's a result. It's not something you're born with. It's not something other people hand you. And it surely doesn't come from height. Real confidence is formed layer by layer, through repetition, through difficulty, through constancy. It's built by what you do every day, not what you say once in a while. It doesn't show up when life is easy. It shows up when you've schooled yourself to stay grounded when life gets hard. That's the kind of confidence that lasts, the kind that leads, performs under pressure, and doesn't flinch when things get nasty. The reason most people don't feel confident isn't because they're not capable. It's because they've established their identity on feelings instead of follow through. They've convinced themselves confidence will come when life gets better, when they get more validation, when someone else finally sees their potential. But confidence doesn't come from being seen. It comes from seeing oneself clearly and honoring that with action. You don't wait to be secure. You construct it through conduct, through decisions, by becoming someone you can rely on. That procedure doesn't depend on other individuals. It doesn't require flawless conditions. It starts with how you lead yourself, how you keep your word, how you hold your standard. Because confidence is the outcome of integrity, of self-trust, of alignment between who you claim you are and how you actually move. You build it when you undertake hard things on purpose, when you finish what you began, when you show up even when you don't feel like it, when you make decisions based on who you're becoming, not who you've been. Every time you recognize your identity instead of your uneasiness, you acquire a piece of confidence. And when you stack those pieces, day after day, they turn into something unshakable. The biggest fallacy is that confidence is about image, about how you look, how you speak, how people perceive you. But the strongest confidence doesn't come from being impressive. It comes from being consistent. The most grounded people don't need to prove anything, since they know they're living in accord. They know they're honoring their standard. They don't need to express their confidence, because their energy already talks. This isn't theory. It's practice. It's about 9 precise actions that develop actual, permanent, repeatable confidence, not based on hype but on identity. Not built on noise but on quiet discipline. These activities transform your perspective from fragile to focused. They help you stop needing permission and start marching in certainty. They shift you from hoping to trusting, not just in your potential, but in your process. These 9 practices are about who you become when no one's clapping, when the lights are off, when it's just you, your habits, and your standard. That's where confidence is developed. Not when everything is going great, but when you stay constant despite chaos, when your decisions don't change just because the conditions do. You don't need to be louder. You don't need to be perfect. You don't need to impress anyone. You just need to keep the promises that matter. Stop outsourcing your belief to the outside world. Start living it. Act like someone worthy of respect, starting with your own. When you trust yourself, you stop needing others to do it for you. Confidence isn't about ego, it's about ownership. And when you own your time, your energy, your routines, and your conduct, you begin to construct something no one can take away. Something unwavering when life gets harsh. Something stable while everything else feels uncertain. That's what these practices are intended to help you build. The first powerful habit that builds unstoppable confidence is learning to keep promises to yourself. Not just when it's easy, not just when it's convenient, but every time. This is your foundation. Because confidence doesn't come from what you say, it comes from what you do. It's built through the record you keep with yourself, day after day, whether anyone sees it or not. The instant you make a promise, tension forms. A line is drawn. Who you say you are steps forward, but your action either honors it or betrays it. Every time you follow through, you build belief. Every time you don't, you generate doubt. And over time, those choices shape your identity. Most individuals don't understand how often they're telling themselves they can't be trusted. They claim, I'll wake up at 6, but push snooze. I'll stick to the plan, but deviate. I'll start tomorrow, but postpone. These moments look minor, yet they're loud. They train your brain your word doesn't matter, that your behaviors don't align, that your motives are empty. And if your own word doesn't mean to you, how can your confidence grow? Keeping pledges to yourself promotes internal respect. You wouldn't trust a friend who continually cancels on you. So why do you allow it from yourself? Confidence is self-trust, and trust is established in repetition, not once, not when it's easy, not when it feels good, but repeatedly, especially when it's painful. Start small. Choose one commitment. Make it daily. Make it noticeable. Make it specific. I will stretch for 5 minutes each morning. I will write for 20 minutes after lunch. I will review my priorities before I check my messages. Keep it simple, clear, measurable. And then preserve it like your identity depends on it. Because it does. The goal isn't volume, it's consistency. One little promise kept every day generates more confidence than 10 huge promises violated weekly. The discipline isn't in how much, it's in how steady. Build the habit of showing up, the habit of not bargaining, the habit of honoring the commitment, not the feeling. Over time, those modest, maintained commitments mount up. You stop wondering if you're motivated. You simply act. You stop disputing your own logic, you execute. The decision was taken yesterday. The plan is already in place. Your identity leads and your behavior follows. That's when the shift happens. Your self-talk alters. You stop saying, I hope I stay on track, and start stating, I'm the kind of person who follows through. And that internal sentence, that's your power. Because once your actions fit your identity, everything changes. You stop forcing things, you start flowing. Your energy alters. People notice. You don't need to explain what you're doing. They feel it. There's weight behind your remarks now. There's proof in your posture. You don't chase confidence. You carry it, quiet, steady, unshakable. The world says, just believe in yourself. But belief isn't given, it's built. And you create it one kept promise at a time. One simple act of integrity that informs your mind, I follow through. You don't break the chain. You don't perform. You honor. You respect. You reinforce. You won't always feel like it. And that's the goal. That's what generates actual confidence. Because when you do it anyhow, you prove you can lead yourself. And that type of proof, that's the kind no one can take from you. That's where confidence is actually born. Next. The second discipline that makes you unstoppable is addressing your patterns instead of repeating them. Most people live their whole lives running internal scripts they never wrote, but nevertheless obey. Scripts like, I always mess up. This is just who I am. Or, things never work out for me. These sentences become beliefs. Those ideas shape conduct. That behavior builds identity. If you don't stop to evaluate your patterns, you'll spend your life reinforcing the very things keeping you stuck. Confidence can't grow in someone frightened to examine their own thoughts. Your patterns don't care about your ambitions. They lure you back into the familiar, even if it's uncomfortable, even if it shrinks you, even if it directly opposes what you say you desire. You can't outperform your patterns. Not long-term, not sustainably. If your habits, your self-talk, your environment, and your daily choices are still wired for who you used to be, no amount of motivation will take you forward. You'll burn out. You'll sabotage progress. You'll repeat the same cycles with new people, new projects, new plans, until you undertake the work of pattern recognition. Start by asking yourself, where do I drift? When do I lose focus? What triggers my self-doubt? What sentences do I repeat when I'm under pressure? What actions do I fall back on when I feel uncertain? These questions can be uncomfortable, but they're vital, because the more you see, the more you can shift. Awareness is the first step to power. Most people don't change because they don't think they need to. They blame external things for their results, when in truth, it's their unregulated patterns running the show. But once you see it, you may challenge it. And once you question it, you can replace it. You replace patterns with intention. You develop a new script, not by pretending, but by building a new default. You disrupt the old story and align with a better one. You stop saying, I always quit, and start saying, I finish what I start. You stop saying, I always mess up, and start saying, I'm learning to stay focused. And, this bit is crucial, you follow that new statement with consistent action. Behavior is what builds belief. You can't just speak it. You have to live it, even when it's uncomfortable. Especially when it's uncomfortable. Because every time you take action that disturbs the old cycle, you retake control. You reduce the grip that your former identity held on you, and you begin developing one that matches with the future you've already selected. Confidence rises every time you face your resistance. When you identify what used to break you, but you show up differently. When you walk into the circumstance that earlier triggered you, but this time you maintain calm. You react with clarity. You finish the chore you used to avoid. You uphold the standard you used to negotiate. That's what change actually feels like. Not hype, but ownership. You become someone who leads yourself. Not because you never deviate, but because you no longer pretend not to notice. You catch the drift sooner. You respond quicker. You cease letting old patterns dictate your life. And that type of awareness, that kind of personal authority, is what produces lasting confidence. You don't need to solve everything at once. You merely need to analyze one pattern, one trigger, track it, shift it, replace it, then repeat. One upgrade at a time, one modification at a time, one layer of alignment at a time. Confidence doesn't need to be dramatic, it just to be persistent. Next, the third discipline that generates unstoppable confidence is speaking to yourself with clarity, not comfort. The voice in your head is the storyteller of your life. It shapes how you see yourself. It colors how you understand your failures. It determines how you respond when things get tough. And if that voice is undisciplined, if it's ambiguous, full of excuses, softening the truth, it will silently take your confidence, one sentence at a time. You can't develop a strong identity with weak language. You can't say, maybe I'll try, and expect to believe in yourself. You can't say, I'll get to it eventually, and expect to act with urgency. You can't tell yourself, this is probably too hard, and expect to find energy. Words matter, the ones you utter out loud, and especially the ones you murmur in your mind. Clarity is the language of confidence. When you talk with precision, you direct your energy. You say, I'm doing this today. This is the plan. This is the standard. This is non-negotiable. And you repeat those phrases until your subconscious believes them, until your body moves in alignment with them, until your life reflects them. Comfort-based self-talk always looks for the exit. It says, you've done enough. Take it easy. You'll try again tomorrow. And while those words sound kind, they quietly train your mind to believe that your comfort matters more than your goals. That your emotions count more than your consistency. That your identity should bend based on how you feel. But when you start speaking with clarity, everything alters. You quit defending your weaknesses. You stop enabling your wander. You start telling yourself the truth, not in a way that pulls you down, but in a way that raises you up. that says, "This isn't who I am anymore." We don't skip that. We don't delay this. We move. You speak to yourself like someone who's on a path, like someone who leads their own life, like someone who keeps their promises, even when no one else is listening. And when you do that regularly, your internal debate becomes your fuel, not your fight. But clarity doesn't just appear, you nurture it. You journal, you review, you reflect. You write down your routines, your goals, your intentions. You give yourself particular terminology to utilize when opposition develops. You rehearse how you'll respond to doubt, how you'll talk to yourself when things get ugly, when you fail, when you drift. You delete statements like, "I'll try," "I'm not sure," "I hope," and replace them with, "I will," "I've decided." This is the way. Not because you know every step, but because you know how to move forward. You speak like someone who owns the path, and over time, your brain starts believing you. This is how you make confidence automatic. Not because you constantly feel terrific, but because your language doesn't break under pressure. When your body becomes fatigued, your mind says, "Keep going." When your plan gets shaky, your voice says, "We adjust, but we don't quit." When fear is loud, your clarity is louder. Your voice becomes your leadership, not because it's louder than your emotions, but because it's more constant. It doesn't flinch. It doesn't waver. It doesn't start and stop. It holds firm. And when your voice holds, your identity strengthens, your standards rise, and your behaviors follow. Next, the fourth discipline that generates unstoppable confidence is piling evidence, not emotion. Most people want to feel secure before they act. They wait for assurance, for clarity, for a surge of motivation to force them into action. But that type of confidence is shaky. It only works when you feel strong. The second doubt creeps in, it dissolves. That's because it's built on emotion, not proof. Real confidence is built on evidence, not hype or speculation. Proof. Tangible, physical proof that you've done hard things, kept your word, followed through. You've trained, you've suffered, you've shown up when it wasn't easy. That mountain of proof becomes your backbone. It's what you lean on when your head lies to you, when your feelings suggest you can't do it. Your behavior indicates, "I've done it before, and I'll do it again." Every time you follow through on something difficult, you get a receipt. You earn evidence. That rep at the gym when you wanted to quit. Evidence. That early morning when you pushed through anyway. Evidence. That conversation you lead with power instead of fear. Evidence. These moments aren't small, they're vital. They're heaping belief. Emotion is transient, it varies, while evidence is constant, it reinforces itself. You look back and see a pattern, and that pattern becomes your identity. The more you show up with discipline, the more confidence becomes inevitable. Not because you feel fantastic, but because your life shows it. You stop needing to persuade yourself into confidence, and you stop relying on others to reassure you. You have the facts, the proof. You've done the work, and you've earned your belief. Not via wishful thinking, but through continuous deeds. No one can take that from you. This means you start charting your wins, not just the major ones, but the modest daily victories. Most confidence is lost in forgetfulness. We forget how far we've come, how often we've demonstrated tenacity, how many times we've followed through. But when you track it, when you write it down, when you revisit it, you remember. And remembering fosters belief. Create a confidence file, a daily diary, a moment where you reflect on one hard thing you did that day and document it. Today, I didn't hit snooze. Today, I said no to something that drained me. Today, I focused when I didn't feel like it. These triumphs establish a trail, a record, a personal archive that becomes unbreakable with time. When doubt comes in, and it will, you'll have something to open, something to read, something to remind you what's true. Confidence doesn't require assurance, it requires reference. And when your life becomes a reference point for resilience, you stop doubting your decisions. Don't wait for major wins to affirm you. The tiniest deeds, done consistently, prove the most. Confidence isn't found at one huge moment, it's in daily deposits. The 5 minutes you showed up when it was easier not to. The difficult thing you finished when quitting was an option. That's where confidence is created. Eventually, you start moving differently. You quit waiting for permission. You stop hoping to feel ready. You merely lead because your evidence is solid, your method is functioning, your identity is confirmed, and no feeling can deconstruct what your track record has already built. Now, here's the sixth important strategy that creates confidence. You must purposefully engineer problems into your life. Most individuals wait for life to confront them, expecting that the next difficult season would strengthen them. But waiting for adversity to find you is a passive approach to create character. Confidence comes from taking the lead, from choosing difficulty before it chooses you, from actively doing hard things on purpose. Comfort is the enemy of confidence. The comfort convinces you that you're powerful when, in truth, you're merely untested. It feels wonderful, it feels safe, but it also hinders you from progressing. The longer you stay in comfort, the less capable you feel when things ultimately go sideways. Because now you're soft, uncertain. Confidence created in comfort is shallow. It's frail and crumbles under pressure. But when you choose to put yourself in challenging situations, you train your resilience. You gain grit. You don't worry when obstacles come since you've already practiced tackling tough situations. You've purposely placed yourself in difficult environments, and you've remained steadfast when your body yelled, "Stop!" This isn't about tolerating misery, it's about growing. It's about choosing to subject yourself to challenges, routines, and conditions that sharpen you. You use the stairs instead of the elevator. You tackle the hard conversations you've been avoiding. You get up without pressing snooze. You write even when you're feeling blocked. You work out when you're exhausted. These actions don't merely yield results, they build confidence. Every time you take on anything challenging, you rewrite your identity. You teach yourself, "I do hard things." That simple word is powerful. It becomes your new story. You stop hesitating. You cease flinching. You cease letting resistance determine your behavior because you've schooled yourself to embrace discomfort and keep going forward. High achievers don't seek for ease. They construct obstacles. They raise their standards. They remove the crutches and escalate the stakes because they understand that the more they practice under pressure, the less pressure shocks them. The more pressure you can manage, the more confident you become. You cultivate this through practices that purposely cause resistance: cold baths, long runs, deep focus work without distractions, days without comfort foods, and uncomfortable talks. These aren't just tasks. They're affirmations that you're capable of more. They remind you that you're not governed by ease, that you can push yourself to the limit and not break. Confidence doesn't merely come from reiterating what you already know. It comes from venturing into unknown situations and watching oneself achieve nevertheless. It comes from proving to your brain, time and time again, that fear doesn't rule your choices, that reluctance doesn't impede your development, and that discomfort doesn't mean you stop. It means you grow. You don't wait for challenges to appear. You prepare for them. You make hardship your ally. You normalize friction. And since you've done this, when true difficulty arrives, you're ready. Not because you're remarkable, but because you've trained. You've been through it before. You've lifted the weight. You've performed the reps. Now, confidence isn't uncertain, it's a pattern. Next, the sixth discipline that promotes unshakable confidence is identifying your benchmark and never compromise it. You can't be confident if you don't know what your standard is. You can't lead yourself if your expectations are unclear, and you won't follow through if you constantly altering the rules whenever things become tough. A clear standard is the boundary between who you were and who you're becoming. It's the code you live by, even when no one else does. Most people let the day determine their standard. They let their energies define their mood. They let the urgency of others define their priorities. But when you know your standard, you stop bending. You stop justifying. You stop allowing external circumstances govern your internal systems, because your behaviors aren't dictated by the present moment. They're motivated by the mission. Your standards are the bargain you have with your future. When you lower them, you delay your own growth. You convince your brain that your word doesn't count, that work is optional, and success is conditional. But when your standard is unwavering, when it remains intact through wariness, irritation, and distraction, confidence follows. Confidence rises in the presence of alignment. You set your standard by defining what is non-negotiable, not what you aspire to achieve, not what you attempt to do, but what you will do, what gets done regardless of how you feel. The morning routine that doesn't slip, the focused work time that never varies, the bedtime that doesn't flex, the workout that always happens. These aren't just duties, they're anchors. They make discipline sustainable. When you identify your standard, you eliminate decision fatigue. You no longer wake up wondering, should I do it today? You just do it. It's not a choice anymore, it's who you are. You don't debate with your standards, you follow them. This clarity frees up your energy, your time, and your attention. And when you stay to your standard, especially when it's hard, you develop a new sense of self-respect. You trust yourself more, hesitate less, think faster, and execute more smoothly. You move like someone who's already aligned because you are. You're not chasing excellence, you're reinforcing it. Confidence isn't the outcome of reaching one objective. It's the product of becoming someone who reaches their benchmark every day. You cease relying on outside reminders. You quit needing external accountability. You lead yourself because you've educated your system to follow a code. But the standard only works if you protect it. You defend it by defining non-negotiables, limits, lines you won't cross, times you won't sacrifice, spots in your schedule that don't flex. When you start living this way, people notice, but more importantly, you notice. You cease feeling scattered. You cease feeling behind. You cease feeling inconsistent. You find rhythm. Eventually, your standard becomes so ingrained that not following it seems incorrect. That's when discipline becomes effortless, not because it's less challenging, but because it's more automatic. That's the power of a clear standard. It doesn't just lead you. Next, the seventh technique to gain confidence is to lead your environment instead of being led by it. Most people allow their circumstances define their state. The noise, the pressure, the timetable, the inputs. Everything imperceptibly shapes their decisions without them even realizing it. The more you let your environment influence your conduct, the less control you have over your path. Confidence erodes not because you've changed, but because your surroundings are dragging you out of harmony. You can't master self-discipline in a chaotic world. If your surroundings is full of friction, your behaviors will always be tougher than they need to be. If every time you try to focus, you're surrounded by clutter, noise, and distractions, you'll constantly fight for clarity. The continual interruptions, that daily opposition, they ruin your flow and rhythm. Over time, they progressively erode your self-respect. The people who thrive at leading themselves don't just manage their time, they manage their environment. They take control of their inputs. They audit what they allow into their minds, their calendars, and their discussions. They create their settings to pull them toward discipline, not temptation. They make it easy to do the right thing and hard to do the wrong one. You don't soar to the level of your potential. You sink to the level of your framework. And structure isn't just internal, it's exterior too. It's your workplace, your kitchen, your car, your schedule, your music, your energy, and your circle. It all counts. If your place doesn't connect with who you're becoming, it will keep you tethered to who you were. Confidence grows in spaces that support your standards. When your morning routine flows because your environment is clear, when your meals align because distractions have been removed, when your phone isn't within reach during deep work, when your relationships don't require you to lower your standards to be understood. These small adjustments shift how you carry yourself. Environment isn't simply physical, it's relational too. If you're surrounded by people who don't value discipline, your discipline becomes difficult to sustain. If your inner circle lives in disorder, you'll start to accept chaos. If individuals you interact with every day lack urgency, vision, and accountability, you'll inevitably slow down to match their pace. So you lead. You elevate the room. You filter your conversations and quit entertaining energy that pulls you out of harmony. You protect your time and guard your focus. You increase the standard, not just for yourself, but for what influences you. You don't need to manage everything, but you do need to lead your space. You reduce friction, simplify, declutter, and design it. You take ownership of your environment as if it matters. Because it does. And when your space begins to represent your identity, your confidence rises effortlessly. Eventually, your surroundings becomes an automatic support system for your routines. Your space holds the line, your rhythm develops momentum, and that momentum makes discipline easier. Not because life quiets down, but because you quit letting the noise dictate your course. The eighth strong practice that makes you unstoppable is to become the source of your own validation. Most people relate their feeling of worth to external acceptance. They rely on recognition, attention, and acclaim. They wait to be acknowledged before they believe they're enough. But confidence built in affirmation is transitory. It vanishes the moment compliments stop. It fades the second someone criticizes your ability. If your identity needs to be constantly reaffirmed from the outside, you will forever be pursuing it. You'll always need just one more person to say you're doing well, one more comment, one more like, and when that feedback doesn't come, your drive diminishes, your standards drop, and your habits weaken because you are built on the wrong basis. Unshakable confidence comes from knowing that what you're doing corresponds with your ideals, whether anyone else notices or not. It comes from developing your own measure of success. It comes from asking yourself, did I show up the way I promised I would? Did I honor my process? Did I live with integrity today? If the answer is yes, you win, not because someone else says so, but because you know that personal validation provides freedom. Freedom to move without waiting for permission. Freedom to stay steady without relying on external hype. Freedom to lead without continuously thinking, am I good enough? When you know your worth, the cacophony around you doesn't shake you because you've already determined who you are and you live it every day. To build this, you must stop outsourcing your self-respect. You must quit handing your identity to those who don't share your vision. You stop assessing your value by how others see you and start measuring it by how you show up. You stop seeking applause and start creating habits that correspond with your principles. You do this by building rituals of self-validation and of-day reflections, internal audits, and moments when you check in and ask yourself, was I excellent today? Not based on the outcome, but on the effort, the attitude, and the intention. Because when you validate yourself daily, you stop relying on the world to do it for you. This doesn't mean isolating yourself, it means leading. You can receive critique, but you don't depend on it to feel entire. You can accept encouragement, but your actions don't rely on it. That's strength. That's independence. That's self-leadership. And confidence can only thrive where leadership has already taken root. Eventually, you become someone who walks into a room and doesn't need to be noticed, because your presence speaks louder than your words. You're not waiting to be chosen. You've already chosen yourself. You don't beg to belong. You belong because you are aligned. You've built belief through your behavior. When life gets quiet, when no one sees the effort, you don't collapse. You keep moving forward because your approval doesn't come from others. It's earned, and you're the one who gives it. That's where confidence becomes permanent. That's where discipline becomes automatic. That's where peace begins. The next practice to create confidence is to finish what you start. It sounds simple, but it's one of the rarest qualities. Most folks start strong but fade. They commit with enthusiasm and then disappear when the excitement fades. They get hyped at the beginning and lose focus somewhere in the middle. But confidence doesn't grow in unfinished projects. Confidence grows when you cross the finish line. When you prove to yourself that you're not just a starter, but a finisher. Every time you leave anything incomplete, you impair your self-belief. You reinforce the identity of someone who doesn't follow through. It's not about the size of the project. If you make quitting a habit, it will follow you into every area of your life. It becomes instinctive. Start, stall, make excuses, repeat. That's not failure, it's deterioration. But when you create the habit of finishing, everything changes. Your brain begins to see you differently. You stop being someone who tries and start becoming someone who does. You stop calling yourself a perfectionist and start calling yourself a finisher. You don't need your work to be flawless, you need it done. Finishing develops trust. Every rep you finish, every chapter you shut, every set you don't skip, those aren't just jobs. They're deposits into your identity. You show that your word matters, that your actions coincide with your standards. When you claim something will happen, it occurs. To create this habit, you must start small. Pick anything you've left unfinished. An exercise you didn't complete, a chapter you didn't write, a plan you didn't finalize. Block time, return to it, finish it, not because it's urgent, but because your identity demands reinforcement. You must rethink what it means to finish. It doesn't mean flawless, it means done, with effort, honesty, and presence. Don't aim for perfection, aim for closure. Get it out, get it delivered, cross it off. That act of ending loops provides your brain serenity. It frees up energy and restores confidence. Your brain loves closure, it despises open tabs. Incomplete tasks don't just stick around, they take mental bandwidth. They make you feel behind and doubt your ability. But when you start closing those loops, you create space, momentum, and control. Confidence isn't just a feeling. It's a history, a track record of repeated actions that tells your brain, we follow through here. That's how you become the kind of person who doesn't flinch under pressure, who doesn't panic when things get tough. You've built evidence. You've finished before, and you'll finish again. Finishing offers you feedback. It shows you what works and what doesn't. You grow stronger from completion, not from ideal begins. You gain data, you gain truth, and that truth becomes wisdom. You can't gain that wisdom by stopping halfway. You must stay long enough to finish. And when you finish something tough, you don't just receive the result. You get the confidence that came from the process. That's where the edge comes from. Not from talking, not from preparing, but from doing, from closing, from executing. When others stall, that's where the distinction resides. Now, you've learned the 9 behaviors that generate unstoppable confidence. Not a confidence based on looks, hype, or ego, but a confidence built on action, identity, and integrity. These aren't merely motivational notions, they're actual disciplines. They are the calm, unwavering rituals that develop momentum, belief, and strength, regardless of the season, regardless of the strain. You've learned that true confidence starts with honoring pledges to yourself, understanding that your word means most when it's private. You've learned that conviction in yourself is earned, given, and that every time you accomplish what you said you would, even when it's unseen, you're developing something that remains. You've analyzed your patterns, quit blaming the world around you, and begun taking full responsibility for what happens within you. Confidence isn't found, it's formed by confronting your defaults, your resistance, and your drift. You've understood that transformation doesn't begin with motivation. It starts with understanding of your patterns, and leadership begins with self-awareness. You've rewired your language, replacing soft, hazy terms with clear. You don't say, "I hope." Longer you declare, "I act, I execute, I finish." Your voice now leads you, not your doubt, since your clarity has seized charge. You've developed evidence, tangible proof, that you're not simply visiting your goals, but living them. You do the hard things, you finish what you start, and you've learned to track those wins, logging the behavior, collecting the receipts, because real confidence is a record of how you've lived, not just how you've dreamed. You've stopped waiting for obstacles to shape you. You've designed them carefully. You've practiced under pressure, knowing you won't crumble under pandemonium. You've chosen suffering to expand your capacity because you recognize that growth doesn't come from comfort. It comes from straining. You've defined your standards and made them non-negotiable. You've quit letting emotions control your behavior. You don't ask yourself if you feel like showing up. You just show up because your standards are no longer subject to debate. And when your standard becomes a habit, confidence becomes the inevitable outcome. You've stopped allowing your environment to control your course. You've taken control of your inputs, removed friction, and made perfection easier to reach. You've created boundaries, led your area, and aligned your surrounds with your goal. That's how you establish an ecology for success. You've stopped outsourcing your worth. You don't seek affirmation from others, nor do you perform for acclaim. You're your own mirror now, assessing your alignment by how you live, not by how others respond. That's what makes you unshakable. Why you can move gently, yet lead fiercely. You've become a finisher, not just a beginner or a dreamer. You're the one who closes the loop, who remains while others delay, who acts when others hesitate. You cross the finish line, not once, but again and over again. That's how real confidence is built, through mobility, resilience, and the repetition of truth.